All right, let's get right into this explainer because today we're tackling a massive topic, the stark realities of modern wage disparities and how they stack up against ancient Indian socioeconomic ideals. Now, in today's economy, income differences are, well, they're absolutely massive. Think about it. A corporate manager might earn 10 times more than the employees who are actually doing the day-to-day operational work. A sweeper, whose work is literally essential for public hygiene, makes just a tiny fraction of what a specialized computer engineer takes home. And in sports, men's teams earn vastly more than women's teams, which is often driven by ad revenue and audience size rather than, actual effort or athletic skill. So today, we're going to look closely at the data driving these modern realities, and then we're going to step back in time. We'll explore how the ancient scriptural texts outlining Ramrajya handled the concepts of labor, value, and true equality.
To keep us on track, here is our roadmap for today. We'll cover 1. The modern income gap. 2. Drivers of wage disparity. 3. The ideal of Ramrajya. 4. Principles of Dharmic economics. 5. Comparing economic systems. And finally, 6. Measuring our true worth. Let's dive in.
Section 1. The Modern Income Gap. A look at today's disparities.
Okay, I want you to just look at this single number, 285 to 1. Now, while a typical corporate manager might make, say, 10 times what their team makes, at the very top, it's a whole different ballgame. An average CEO in the S&P 500 makes 285 times what their median employee makes. Just let that sink in for a second. The data shows that in 2024, average executive compensation reached nearly $19 million. That's a figure that has completely, utterly detached from the wages of everyday workers. And this massive gap isn't just happening in corporate boardrooms, it's highly visible in professional sports, too. An NBA player averages around $11.9 million a year, while a WNBA player averages about $120,000. It perfectly highlights this underlying tension between market economics and social justice, right? We're valuing groups based on advertising revenue and market demand rather than pure athletic effort or skill.
When we zoom out and look across various corporate indices, we see that modern extreme wage concentration is heavily driven by multinational conglomerates. The median pay ratio can jump wildly depending on the sector. For instance, it reaches an estimated 1739 to 1 at companies like Coca-Cola. This happens because you have executives pulling in tens of millions through stock options, while the median employee, who's perhaps working on the bottling line or in distribution, earns just a microscopic fraction of that.
Section 2. Drivers of wage disparity. Let's look behind the numbers. We really need to define our terms clearly here, especially when we start talking about the gender pay gap. The data tells us that while equal pay for the exact same job, what we call the controlled gap, is nearly achieved at 99 cents to the dollar, the uncontrolled gap sits at just 82 cents to the dollar. So what does that actually mean? Well, it tells a compelling story. Structural barriers, caregiving penalties, and occupational segregation still hold the overall gap wide open. Women are simply and structurally underrepresented in the highest-paying executive positions.
And let's see how it's all built up over time. Back in 1965, the CEO-to-worker ratio was a pretty modest 21 to 1, but by the year 2000, it skyrocketed to 380 to 1. Executive compensation has completely decoupled from broader labor productivity trends since the 1960s, and because pay raises are often distributed as percentages of an existing salary, those massive initial disparities naturally compound into astronomical gaps over the decades.
Returning to sports for a moment, the pay gap isn't just about total league revenue. It's actually about the underlying collective bargaining agreements. Historically, NBA players are guaranteed roughly 50% of basketball-related income. WNBA players, on the other hand, received around 20%, or even less of their league's revenue. So it's these structural agreements that play a massive role in deciding who gets what slice of the pie.
Which brings us to a really provocative pivot. Science and economics explain these wage gaps through market forces, right? Scarcity of skill, market demand, productivity. But we have to ask, why should a sweeper, whose work is absolutely essential for a functioning, hygienic society, earn a tiny fraction of what a computer engineer earns? Why should women athletes be systematically underpaid compared to men when both groups train equally hard? Are these unregulated market forces naturally efficient? Are we looking at a fundamental failure to align compensation with basic human dignity and social utility?
Section 3. The Ideal of Ramrajya, an ancient socio-economic model.
To explore an entirely different way of valuing labor, let's take a journey back to classical Indian political philosophy. The Ramcharitmanas, specifically in the Uttarakhand, describes Ramrajya as a time when, quote, all people were happy, no one suffered. The Valmiki Ramayana echoes this exact sentiment in the Udikand, describing a society with absolutely no disease, no sorrow, and no famine. Now, this harmony wasn't enforced by some heavy-handed state apparatus. It was achieved by decentralized self-regulation, a concept known as Swadharma. Everyone's work was aligned with collective well-being, naturally mitigating the systemic frictions and the stress we see in modern labor relations.
Under this ancient framework, hierarchy absolutely existed, but it was a Dharmic hierarchy. Every single profession was honored. The sweeper's work was seen as a vital, respected service to society, not some inferior labor meant to be exploited. In fact, this holistic welfare was so complete that the texts actually note that even the cows and bulls were happy. The king acted as a public trustee, which is a complete 180 from modern capitalism, where the accumulation of capital at the top is so often the ultimate goal.
Section 4. Principles of Dharmic Economics. Wealth as Stewardship.
I absolutely love this metaphor from the Rigveda. Wealth rotates like the wheels of a chariot. It's such a powerful warning against hoarding and a beautiful reminder that success is a cycle. Wealth was meant to be circulated through yajnas, charity, and public service. The idea is, if you're at the top today, you must help those below, because the wheel will inevitably turn. In this view, wealth is essentially stewardship, not permanent personal property.
The ancient texts outlined a very clear procedure for all this. The Chanakya Sutras dictate that good governance is the absolute prerequisite for ethical wealth creation, and that wealth, when it's managed correctly, secures righteousness, which ultimately leads to human happiness. See, wealth creation isn't condemned here at all. It's encouraged, but its legitimacy depends entirely on it being earned ethically and then redistributed to maintain social balance. By formally separating intellectual authority from material wealth, this system purposefully sought to prevent the dangerous concentration of absolute power that we see so often today. As the Bhagavad Gita 4.13 notes, the four Varnas were created according to qualities and duties. The intellectual class, the Brahmins, relied on voluntary alms, visibly demonstrating renunciation. Meanwhile, the political and financial classes were strictly duty-bound to protect and distribute wealth. Social status was completely, fundamentally decoupled from material accumulation.
Moving on to Section 5, Comparing Economic Systems, 3 Distinct Paradigms.
Think about modern capitalism. It relies heavily on stimulating desires and rewarding productivity and scarcity. In our current system, wealth generally equates directly to status. Dharmic economics, on the other hand, places material pursuit strictly within a moral framework. It rewards duty and service above all. As the Bhagavad Gita 3.13 points out, those who eat food offered in sacrifice are freed from sin. What that means is wealth and food were explicitly linked to sacrifice, dharma, and collective sharing, rather than just individual greed.
So the debate isn't just a binary between capitalism and communism. Communism seeks absolute state-enforced material equality. Capitalism prioritizes individual accumulation and efficiency. Dharmic economics, however, does not seek state-enforced sameness. It accepts that hierarchy is natural. As the ancient texts say, 2 cows born from the same mother give different milk. But it ensures fairness through reciprocal social obligations and ethical wealth circulation. Under this model, true equality isn't sameness, it's fairness according to Dharma. Finally, Section 6, Measuring Our True Worth, Reflecting on Modern Values. The sources we've looked at suggest that income differences exist in literally every age. Disparities are universal, but lasting social stability, that might not come from unlimited consumption, and it might not come from forced communist or socialist redistribution either. Instead, ancient wisdom offers us a powerful alternative perspective, sustainable stewardship. It's all about ethical self-restraint and treating your societal role, whether you happen to be a street sweeper or a software engineer, as a deeply respected duty.
So, I'll leave you with this provocative thought to reflect on today. How do we actually measure worth, and what can we learn from the past? Should we continue to measure human worth solely by a market-dictated salary, or should modern society take a page from Ramrajya, where fairness was achieved by righteousness and duty rather than force? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. If you enjoyed this, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to get notified for more such explainers.